Today I'm going to make a video that explains how to play the game Titan by Avalon Hill. There's also going to be a section for the Demi Lords and a section for the playtested but never published Magi and the Mighty expansion. So I'll take a look at those. Those will be in the chapter select and timestamped down below, as well as ending the video with the rules summary page that has been created by fans just for a quick reference. So, let me open the box, get the rules going. Titan is a fantasy war game for 2 to 6 players. Each player will move, muster, and engage in combat with his forces of monstrous characters. The prime component of each player's force is the Titan. Each player receives only one Titan, and if it is lost, the player is out of the game and all of his forces are removed from play. The object of the game is to have only one Titan left in play, all others having been eliminated. Titan involves 2 areas of player interaction: Masterplay and Battle. The strategic area, Masterplay, involves movement of each player's forces from land to land on the master board, the game map board. The forces that are moved about the master board are called character counters and are grouped into legions. When a legion is moved into a land on the master board, which contains another player's legion, the 2 legions are locked in an engagement. An engagement must result in the complete elimination of at least one of the involved legions, and may pit the 2 legions against each other in a tactical battle upon the battle land corresponding to the land being engaged in. Titan is also played in a series of turns called game turns. During each turn, one player gets a chance to move his legions on the master board, attack other players' legions in engagements, and muster new characters to increase the size and strength of his legions. Battle is resolved in a series of maneuver phases and strike phases, during which the player involves commit to the characters in their legions to combat upon the battle land, which corresponds to the land where the engagement is taking place. Game equipment consists of, first, the masterboard. That is the game map upon which the strategic level of Titan is played. The masterboard is a network of 96 spaces representing the lands of Titan. These lands are divided among 11 different types of terrain, and each land is named and numbered for easy reference. The lands are connected by signs set on their interlocking borders, which regulate the movement of legions around the masterboard. The blank areas among the beyond the lands are voids that the legions may not cross or enter. In each of the 4 corners of the masterboard is a master chart, which details the characters available to be mustered in certain terrains. The battle lands are displayed on several separate sheets of paper. They are the arenas of battle. Each battle land depicts one of the 11 terrains on the masterboard and is divided into 27 hexes. Some of these hexes contain hazards which may affect the movement and combat ability of characters. These ones here I will get to later in the video, but those were a special part of a magazine called The Badlands of Titan that you could print out and copy and make. And I downloaded these off of Board Game Geek, so they are available. The game also comes with counters. These are the cardboard playing pieces. The playing pieces are divided into character counters, hit chits, and legion markers. Legion markers are identified by a unique pictogram. In the box of Titan, there are a total of 6 color-coded sets of 12 markers, each corresponding to a Titan counter. Titan counters display the word Titan and the symbol X-4 upon a capped silhouette. So here's the example of a Titan. The other counters represent the various characters in the game. Above each character's silhouette is its name, below are its battle factors. Hit chits are number counters which are used during battles to indicate damage. These are the hit chits. Titan itself came with 4 6-sided dice used to determine the distance that legions are moved on the masterboard and to represent strikes of characters in battle. I recommend getting a lot more. Characters are the basic units of the game which make up each player's forces. They're organized into legions on the masterboard, but maneuver and fight separately when deployed on a battle land. Characters can be of 3 classes: lords, demi-lords, and creatures. All of the different characters in the game are listed on the character chart that comes in the rulebook with the game, which looks like this. And if you do not have the actual rulebook, PDFs or summaries are available online. Primarily Board Game Geek is where I go for this type of stuff. Lords are divided into 3 types: Titans, Angels, and Archangels. Each player begins the game with 1 Titan and 1 Angel. More Angels, and then Archangels, may be acquired as the game continues. A player may never have more than 1 Titan in play. Lords possess the special power of Teleportation. We will get to that later. The existence of a player's Titan assures that the player's continued existence is in the game. Guardians and Warlocks are the 2 types of Demi Lords. They can only be recruited in tower lands on the master board. They differ from creatures in that they are returned to the caretaker's stacks when they are destroyed and can be mustered again. Warlocks possess some special powers used in battle. In the base game of Titan, there are 19 types of creatures that make up characters that are called creatures. They can be mustered from the various terrains of the master board. Creatures such as lions, hydras, and other things like the behemoth here form the bulk of a player's forces. Once slain, creatures are permanently removed from the game. Each character counter displays the character's name, its silhouette, and its battle factors, and any symbols denoting special abilities. The left-hand battle factor is the power factor. This is the number of dice that the character rolls when it strikes, and it is the number of hits it must take before it is slain. The right-hand battle factor is the skill factor. This affects the character's relative skill in giving and taking damage, and is also the character's movement allowance during battle. Some characters have a lightning bolt and or a star symbol placed between their battle factors. These symbols indicate that the character has the ability to range strike, the lightning bolt, or fly with the star. Legions are the basic formations of play for the strategic area of the game, Masterplay. Each legion is comprised of a group of characters and counters stacked underneath an identifying legion marker of the owning player's color. Each legion is placed on one of the lands of the master board, with no more than 1 legion per land. Legions move and engage in combat as a single entity. A character cannot be moved onto the master board except as a member of a legion. Legions cannot drop characters off, although characters can be split from legions to form new legions. Legions may contain a maximum of 7 characters. While 7 high, they cannot muster or summon other characters. A 7 high legion may continue to move normally and may be teleported. If at any time a legion is found to contain more than 7 counters, its characters are immediately revealed and its largest creatures, by value, are removed until it has no more than 7 characters. If it lacks creatures, remove Demi Lords, then Archangels, then Angels. It is returned to its land. No legion may exist without a proper legion marker. Each player receives a color-coded set of 12 legion markers, which allow him to have up to 12 legions on the master board at any given time. A player can add a legion to the master board only if he has a marker available that is not already in play and is able to split one of his legions. To be able to field more than 12 legions, a player must eliminate another player, thereby gaining use of the eliminated player's legion markers. When a legion splits, both the old and the new legion must contain at least 2 characters, and all of the characters that they contain must be in the old legion before the split. The new legion's characters are removed from the old legion and placed beneath their own marker. Players do not reveal which characters they split off. The new legion stack is considered to be in the same land as the old legion, but one of them must be moved in that game turn if possible. They may both be moved, but they may not move into the same land. If neither can move out during their presence of another friendly legion, the new legion is aborted, and all of the characters remain in the original legion. Note that it is also possible to split a sufficiently large legion into 3 legions, each composed of at least 2 characters. A 3-way split is permissible, even if only one of the new legions will be able to move this turn. Any legion that loses all of its characters is eliminated, its marker is returned to its owner, and it may be used again if they wish to start another legion. The character counters in a legion are stacked face down on the master board, underneath the legion marker, so that even if a stack is disturbed, its characters are not revealed. A player who wishes to examine one of his own stacks should leave its marker on the land which it occupies as he does so, and he should not examine more than 1 legion at a time. If a player accidentally disturbs another player's legions so that at least 1 counter is revealed, the offended player may look through any one of the offending player's legions. revealing it if he so desires. The offended player may look through the offending player's legions. A player may not use another player's legion markers unless he has eliminated that player. A player may not transfer or share command of his legions, nor may he trade or transfer characters with other players or among his own legions, except when splitting off a new legion or summoning an angel. Once a legion is placed on the master board and it does not abort, it remains in play until either all of its characters or its Titan have been eliminated. No player may simply choose to remove his legions or one belonging to any other player. Players cannot exchange legion markers between legions in play or change a legion's marker. Markers in use remain in play until the respective legion is eliminated. A new legion marker is added only when an existing legion is split. Starting Masterplay consists of first the master board being placed in the center of the table to be played on. Each player then takes a set of 12 legion markers and the Titan counter of the same color. One player should be selected to act as the caretaker. He will distribute the characters and counters as they are required. The counters should be sorted by character and stacked nearby so as to be visible to all players. The battle lands can be set aside, much more organized than this, until they are needed to resolve an engagement. Then another player should be selected to be the scorekeeper. They'll need a pen and paper, place the dice on the table where they're available to all players. Each player will roll one die to determine which tower land his legion will begin in. If players roll the same number or roll the number of a tower land already assigned to another player, they must roll again. Note that the tower lands are numbered in multiples of 100, but for determination of the zeros are ignored. The player assigned the highest number tower will play first. Each player begins the game with 2 legions, both of which must start on the assigned tower land. The player's Titan is placed in one legion, and an angel is placed in another. Each player also receives 2 of each of the tower creatures. Those are listed here on the muster chart. And those are centaurs, gargoyles, and ogres. 3 creatures and 1 lord must be placed in each legion. These initial assignments of characters are confidential and should not be revealed to the other players. These beginning legions may not be split until the player's second game turn. Now breaking down game turns. Titan is played on a series of turns called game turns, beginning with the first player and proceeding clockwise around the table until the game ends. The player who is taking his turn is known as the mover. Each game turn consists of 4 phases: commencement, movement, engagement, and enlistment. The different activities of these phases are meant to take place in their prescribed order, and are all the activity of a particular phase should be completed before proceeding to the next phase. Players who forget to do something should not be allowed to do it out of sequence ladder, except in the instance of an unresolved engagement, which should be resolved as soon as it is discovered as overdue. Activity that takes place out of order is invalid, but if another game turn has begun since it occurred, the activity should be allowed to stand. During the commencement phase, the mover may split new legions from his existing legions. This is the only method of bringing more legions onto the master board. To speed play, players should plan and arrange their splits ahead of time so that they can immediately begin to move when the player moving before them finishes. At the start of the movement phase, the mover will roll a single die for his movement. Once the roll is made, he may create no more new legions this game turn. During the movement phase, he must move at least one of his legions. A moving legion must move as many lands as the number rolled on the die, or until it enters a land occupied by an opposing legion, whichever comes first. He may move all or only some of his legions, but must move at least one. Only the mover's legions may be moved out at this time, and only the mover may move them. The details of moving will be explained later. During the engagement phase, every engagement is initiated by the mover during preceding movement phase must be resolved by the complete elimination of at least one of the 2 engaged legions. If more than one engagement has occurred, the mover determines the order of their consideration and resolution. Each engagement should be considered separately by the 2 involved players and must be fully resolved before considering the next. The details resolving engagements will be gone over later. And we'll say this piece here moved onto the woods this turn. So during the enlistment phase, each of the mover's legions that was moved in the movement phase and survived the engagement phase may muster a new character. The mechanics of mustering will be gone over later, but in the interest of speeding play, players can deviate here slightly from the normal sequence of the game turn. Players can check each legion as they finish moving it to see if it can muster a new character, instead of waiting until they have moved them all to resolve any engagements. Note, however, that legions defending in engagements have first call on any characters that may be running low in the caretaker's stacks. Thus, characters recruited by the mover may have to be turned over to the defending legion. Also, a moving legion which normally could not muster because it is 7 high may have an angel summoned out of the legion during the engagement phase, thereby allowing it to muster. And this is the muster charts, which tell you what you can get for mustering. And when a player's game turn ends, they will announce this fact so that the next player knows to begin his turn. A player's game turn begins when he splits his first legion for that turn or makes his movement roll, whichever occurs first. Now we'll talk about moving your legions. Each legion must be moved individually and completely before another legion is moved. No legion may be moved more than once per movement phase. A legion must be moved in its entirety. Its characters cannot be dropped off or moved separately on the master board. Only the mover's legions may be moved, and the mover decides in which order they will move. As each legion is moved, its marker should be flipped over or turned to its side and rotated to indicate this legion has finished moving. During the enlistment phase, the mover can flip its marker back upright and determine whether or not that legion will muster a creature. A legion may be moved through a land occupied by another of the mover's legions, but may not end its move on such a land. Each legion moved must travel the full count of the movement roll unless another player's legion is encountered in the moving legion's path, in which case its move ends and there are 2 legions are now locked in an engagement. No further movement is allowed into or across the land of an engagement during that turn, except teleportation. A legion whose move would end on a land occupied by another of the mover's legions may not make that move unless the second legion is also capable of moving and moves beforehand. The mover is not forced to move a legion just to allow another legion to move. This may give the mover the option of aborting the split out of a new legion by occupying the only land the new legion could move to. All moves must follow the signs from land to adjacent land according to the count on the movement roll, except when the movement roll is a 6 and a legion is eligible for teleportation. The signs are of 4 types. First, we have the blocks. Then there are arches, arrows, and triple arrows. The top of each sign touches the land toward which it points. The single symbol signs, blocks, arches, and arrows exist only in pairs pointing in opposite directions. The signs are explained as following. We have here a block. A legion whose last move ended on a land from which a block points must begin its next move in that direction. Then we have an arch. A legion whose last move ended on a land from which the arch points may begin its next move in that direction. Then we have the single arrow. A legion standing on a tower land, right here, may begin its next move in the direction of any of the tower's arrows. A legion that moves into a land from which a single arrow points may continue its move in one of those directions, but it may not backtrack. And we have the triple arrow. A legion whose last move ended on a land from which a triple arrow points may begin its next move in that direction unless the land also contains a block. A legion that moves into a land from which a triple arrow points must move in that direction if it continues moving. And note that blocks and arches apply only to a legion's initial direction of movement, the first land it moves to from its starting point. They have no effect upon legions passing through lands which contain either of these signs. Arrows and triple arrows may guide initial directions and thereafter regulate the execution of movement. You also have the option for a first move mulligan. Because the first turn movement roll can be crucial, each player is allowed a second roll if not satisfied with their first. The second roll is then binding. A player may do this only on his very first game turn. If he chooses not to, he doesn't have the option to do it later. Now we'll talk about teleportation. It's a special type of movement requiring the presence of lords, which allows the moving forces to disregard the normal movement rules. There are 3 types of teleportation: tower teleportation, Titan teleportation, and the summoning of angels. Tower and Titan teleportation take place on the master board during the movement phase and involve the movement of legions. Only 1 legion can be teleported per movement phase, and only 1 angel can be summoned during the engagement phase. Say this legion is face down as normal, but a legion containing 1 or more lords that begins its move in a tower land may perform a tower teleportation only when the movement roll is a 6. From that tower land, it may be teleported to a vacant tower land anywhere on the master board, or to any vacant land up to 6 lands distant from the tower land it began in. The teleporting legion moves along the lands, ignoring all signs and enemy legions, engaged or not. The mover must reveal to all other players the identity of the lord in that legion to allow such a move. So be careful, because if you're doing that with your Titan, you got a target on your back. We'll go over scoring in a little bit, but once a player has a legion that has attained a score of over 400 points and its Titan has a power factor of 10 or better, he may perform a Titan teleportation with his Titan legion, the legion containing his Titan specifically. On a movement roll of 6, that Titan legion may teleport from whatever land it occupies to any land, regardless of distance, that contains another player's legion and engage it in battle. A legion moved by Titan teleportation may not stop on a vacant land. It must initiate an engagement. The mover must show that the legion contains their Titan. Teleportations are optional, and legions able to teleport have the option of moving normally or not moving at all if required to do so. Engagements. An engagement occurs when a moving legion enters a land already occupied by another player's legion. The engagement involves only the players owning the 2 legions, the characters in which these legions now contain, and the characters which may be added during battle. The mover is considered the attacker, and the other player is considered the defender. An engagement ends when at least one of the engaged legions is completely eliminated. That is by fleeing, concession, agreement, or battle. Engagements resolved one at a time at the mover's choice. The mover first selects the order in which engagements are to be resolved. For each engagement, the 2 involved players first consider their options by secretly examining the characters in the opposing legion. The character in the 2 opposing legions are kept secret until they are either voluntarily slain as part of an agreement or concession and turned over to the caretaker. Or the agreement is resolved in the engagement by battle, which must be conducted in view of other players. After this examination, the players determine how they will resolve the engagement. The defender may immediately opt to flee. If the defender flees, his characters are automatically and completely eliminated, and the attacker wins with no losses. The attacker would then only receive half the total value of the eliminated characters, rounding down, added to his score when the defender flees. The attacker cannot flee, and a defending legion containing a lord cannot flee. If the defender suggests an agreement or accepts battle, he may not then flee. A negotiated agreement to resolve an engagement must be mutually agreed to by both of the engaged players and must include the elimination of at least one of the engaged legions. An agreement can include losses to the winning legion, and even mutual elimination, but it cannot involve characters not present in either legion. Agreements may involve promises of later movements or actions by the players, but only that part of the agreement involving the elimination of present characters is binding. Agreements cannot involve the awarding of more or less points than the value of all the characters in the legion that is eliminated. If the agreement is for mutual elimination, no points are awarded, except when the defender flees. Either player may demand that the battle be played out. This makes the battle the basis of any negotiated agreement. Once the defender declines the option to flee and cannot conclude an agreement, either player has the option at any time of conceding the engagement. Only one player can concede, thereby ending the engagement. The conceding player's legion is completely eliminated, and the victor's legion suffers no further losses. The winner of an engagement by concession receives the full score value for the loser's characters. A player can concede with any legion, including his Titan legion, which eliminates them from the game. Concessions are generally made to speed play, to deny the defender reinforcements, or to avoid slaying a weak character in a 7-high attacking legion, which could be replaced after the battle by acquiring an angel or mustering. When an engagement is decided by elimination of at least one of the engaged legions, the point values of the losing legion's characters are added to the score of the winning player. If the winner receives enough points, he may be able to add an angel to the victorious legion. Creatures eliminated from either legion are permanently lost. They are not returned to the caretaker's stacks, nor used again this game. Lords and Demi Lords are returned to the caretaker and can be reused. The marker of a legion that is eliminated is removed from the master board and returned to its owner, who may reuse it. The surviving characters of the winning legion are returned to the land on the master board where the engagement took place beneath their legion marker. That's sloppy. And now we get to battle. Battle is the tactical area of the game. It's fought on a battle land corresponding to the terrain of the land where the engagement has occurred. So we're going to use hills for this example. Battle is resolved in consecutive turns called battle rounds, during which each player conducts a maneuver phase followed by a strike phase that is mutual. During a player's maneuver phase, he moves the characters of his engaged legion on the battle land to best position them for combat. After every maneuver phase follows a strike phase during which both players simultaneously strike the other characters. The player whose maneuver phase preceded the strike phase strikes with his characters first. Battle ends when all of the characters, one or both of the engaged legions, is eliminated, or after 7 battle rounds, whichever occurs first. Each battle land is marked with the name of its terrain. This name side corresponds to the numbered side of the land of the engagement on the master board. The characters of the attacking legion enter the battlefield on the same relative side, which will be 4 hexes wide, as their legion entered the land when moving onto the master board. The defending legion's characters enter the 3 hex opposite side of the attacker. There are some exceptions to that. The attacker's forces will always enter along a wide side, and the defender will enter from a narrow side. So if these units were going from the marsh into the hills from down on the lower right, you would take the battle land and move it this way, so you'd be entering from this side, the defender from these 3. Distinction between the opposing forces is based on the counter's facings. Each player should have the bottom of his counters nearest his entry side. Characters from either legion that do not enter onto the battlefield during each of the player's first maneuver phases are considered eliminated and may not be brought on later. Characters eliminated in this matter count toward the victor's score. However, when using the tower battle land, the attacker's entry side is always the lower left side opposite the name side. The defender's forces must be deployed within the walled area, and that will be in lieu of the defender's first maneuver phase. Note that such characters do not enter from the name side. They are deployed directly into the walled area and may not move into the defender's first maneuver phase. The name side is considered the defender's entry side for the purposes of reinforcement. The defender always takes his maneuver phase first in each battle round. When the attacker uses a Titan Teleportation to cause an engagement, he may enter from the 4 hex wide side of his choice, except when attacking a tower. A turn record track is provided at the bottom of every battle land. The defender places the marker of his legion on the first turn box prior to his maneuver phase. And before each of his subsequent maneuver phases, he should advance the marker 1 box. The legion marker of the attacking legion remains on the master board to mark the location of the engagement. If the battle has not ended before the defender's 8th maneuver phase, the remaining characters of the attacker's legion are eliminated, and whatever is left on the defender's legion is returned to the master board. This is referred to as a time loss, and the defender receives no points for the victory. During a strike phase, each player must strike with each of his characters in contact with an opposing character. The player whose maneuver phase preceded the strike phase strikes first, and then the other player responds. Strikes are considered to be simultaneous, and slain characters are not removed until they have conducted any allowable strikes. Talking about the maneuver phase. During a maneuver phase, the moving player may move the characters of his engaged legion on the battle land. Only the phasing player's characters may be moved. And he may not move any of his opponent's characters. He may move as few or as many of his characters as he wishes. Characters are moved one at a time, and the movement of a character must be completed before the next one is moved. A character cannot be moved more than once per maneuver phase. When entering a battle land during the player's first maneuver phase, the first hex a character moves into must be lying along the correct side of entry. This hex counts against the character's maximum allowable movement for that phase. Characters cannot be moved off of the battle land. During a maneuver phase, a character may be moved a maximum number of hexes onto the battlefield equal to or less than the character's skill factor. Movement may be restricted due to the presence of other friendly characters, enemy characters, and hazards within the hexes along the hex sides. Any two opposing characters occupying adjacent hexes at the start of any maneuver phase are considered to be locked in contact with each other. There are exceptions, like cliffs. A character that begins its maneuver phase in contact with one or more enemy characters cannot move. A character moving through a hex or hexes adjacent to enemy characters is not in contact with them and need not end its movement in such hexes. Certain hazards along a hex side or inside a hex may slow characters attempting to enter those hexes. We'll go over the hazards in a little bit. When crossing or entering such a hazard, the hex moved into counts as 2 hexes entered. If a character does not have the movement allowance left to move 2 hexes, it cannot enter or cross the hazard. A flying character ignores all hazards except volcanoes, which only dragons may enter or cross until it lands. If a flying character is slowed by a hazard in a hex which chooses to land, landing in that hex counts as moving 2 hexes. Hazards have no effect on movement of characters leaving the hex. Exception to that would be cliffs. So if you're attacking and your lion wants to move in, this would count moving it onto the board from your entering side, because you will not start battle with all of your characters deployed. That is why it tells you that any characters that can't get onto the board are eliminated. A non-flying character cannot enter a hex that contains another character, even if it's friendly. A flying character may be moved across hexes that are occupied. A flying character always lands at the end of its move, but may not land on a hazard that forbids its entry. In an occupied hex, or hex which it does not have a sufficient movement allowance to enter, movement is also forbidden. Characters may not straddle hexes, nor may unspent moves be carried over to a new movement phase. The Plains Battleland has a hazard chart, as does the rulebook. If you do not have these items, you can also find the rulebooks online. Again, BoardGameGeek.com is where I can find PDFs. I'm not going to go over each of these hazards in particular. I'll just leave that up to you as you play the game. But we have plains, which have no effect on movement, no effect on striking, no effect on range striking. And then we have things like trees, which affect movement, bramble, drifting, volcanoes, walls, slopes, cliffs, dunes, sand, and bog. But we will get into some of what these details from these regions and things mean, these hazards, like native units that benefit from them, the effects on movement they have, the effect on striking they have, and the effect on range striking. So each hazard will have its own specific limitations and boons to certain figures. Now we're going to get into the strike phases. During a strike phase, both players attack with all of their characters that begin that phase on the battle land in contact with one or more enemy characters. The player whose maneuver phase immediately preceded the strike phase resolves the strikes of all his characters first, and only his characters may employ range striking. Characters slain during a strike phase are not removed from play until the end of that phase, and after they have had a chance to strike. Every character that can strike must strike, unless all adjacent enemy characters are already slain. To strike, a character rolls a number of dice equal to its power factor. The skill factors of the striking and target characters are cross-referenced on the skill chart to determine the strike number. That's the minimum number needed on each die to score a hit. Each die roll equal to or greater than the strike number is a hit. When the character accumulates hits equal to or greater than its power factor, it is slain. So we'll just use an example here and say this lion is going to attack this ogre. So you get your 5 dice. You get your skill factors of the 2 opposed in combat, so 3 and 2. So then you would go here. The attacker's skill factor is 3. The defender's is 2. On 3s or higher, you hit. So we just scored 3 hits on this stupid ogre. And when using the chits to keep track of wounding, you can look for each specific number, but there's a lot of these and they're little, so you can write on the back of some of them or just keep the correct number there to indicate the wounds. The player who just completed his maneuver phase attacks with his characters first, deciding the order in which they will strike and at which enemy characters. Each character strikes once per strike phase. It strikes individually and must complete its attack before the next character strikes. Players may not strike their own characters. When the first player is finished, the opposing player conducts his attacks. And I know we just did an example, but I'm going to again, just for the sake of it. For each character that strikes, the owning player must first specify which enemy character he will strike and then determine the strike number needed to hit. Again, the strike number is found by cross-referencing the skill factors of the attacking and target character on the strike chart, which will reveal a number result. For example, this ogre with a skill factor of 2 is striking a lion skill factor of 3. Cross-referencing the ogre's skill factor of 2 with the lion's factor of 3 gives a strike number of 5 if you're looking at the chart. That 5 is then the minimum number needed on the dice to strike and score points of damage on the lion. When the ogre rolls its strike of 6 dice, the ogre, again having a power factor of 6, all results of 5 or 6 against the lion will be hit results. 1 to 4 are misses. The lion would then be slain and removed from the game at the end of any strike phase in which its power limit of 5 has been met with wounds. Hazards in either the attacker or target's hex or on the hex sides between them may affect the strike number. Reference your hazards chart if you're using them. I'm going to take a moment to throw an anecdote in here from playing this game growing up. This guy gets me every time, the Guardian. Not gets me as in kills me, but gets me as in throwing 12 dice seems like a lucrative addition to my army. However, that skill factor of 2 is pretty terrible. So I waste time going to get these guys, and I'm usually wiped out when I finally get them to battle. So I like to call these things a waste of time. Some people may use them effectively or love them, but just a funny memory of always playing this game growing up, as I would go for these, and it would often end terribly. And again, damages that characters take during battle should be noted with the hit chits provided. Damage accumulates and cannot be repaired during battle. Damage has no effect on the wounded character's ability to move or strike, even if it only has 1 hit remaining. Characters that are damaged, but not slain, are automatically healed when the battle ends. Slain characters are eliminated and cannot be healed. If a strike scores more points of damage than are needed to slay the target character, the extra points may be carried over to another enemy character, which must also be adjacent to the attacker, provided that the attacker would not have normally needed a higher strike number to hit the second character. No damage can be carried over to a character which would require a higher strike number to hit, regardless of whether the numbers on the dice would have been high enough to score damage at that higher strike number. For example, an ogre has the option of striking either a lion, which has already accumulated 3 hits, or a centaur, which is undamaged. The strike numbers for his 2 potential targets are 5 for the lion, 6 for the centaur. The ogre would attack... Before I continue, I'll just fix the visual example. The ogre would then attack the lion, needing to roll 5s to hit. Regardless of how many 6s he rolls, the best he can do is give the lion 2 more hits and slay it. He cannot cause any damage to the centaur. A player may, however, choose to strike at the first character using a strike number higher than normally necessary, so that any extra points of damage can be carried over to the second target. This option must be announced prior to rolling dice, clearly stating the first target and the optional strike number for the strike. You need not declare where extra hits will carry on to. So again, using that above example, the ogre could decide to count only 6s rolled as hits, and thus if he rolls more than 2 6s, the centaur would then get any damage carried over by these additional hits. However, now 5s will not hit the lion. Carrying over points of damage is optional. The striking player decides whether or not to do so if he can. Characters may increase their power or skill when striking down across various hazards. And again, those hazards would be explained. Characters employing these benefits may not carry over damage to characters against which the attacker benefits would not normally have applied. Players wishing to carry over damage may forego any benefits of their attacks which the hazard allowed. Just a quick visual example here is this ogre will be on the slope. So an effect on striking would be a native character adds 1 die when striking down across a slope. And ogres are native to slopes. So a non-native character loses a skill factor when striking up across a slope. And it'll have effects on things like range striking. So this gargoyle striking up at this ogre on the slope would then have his skill factor reduced to 2. So he would need 4s or greater to score hits. Characters are removed from the battle land at the end of the strike phase which they are slain. Each player's slain character should be stacked off the battlefield near the edge which they entered to facilitate scoring at the end of battle. Slain lords and demi lords are not returned to the caretaker stacks until after an engagement is resolved. Thus, they are not available to be acquired for points or recruited as a reinforcement, respectively, during an engagement in which they are slain. And remember, if a character does receive enough damage to be slain, it still has the option to strike back before it's removed. Now we will talk about range striking. During a strike phase, the player who just completed the previous maneuver phase is entitled to employ range striking. The opposing player may not employ range striking in the strike phase. A player range strike is a special strike representing thrown weapons, spells, breathing fire, etc., which is directed against one specific, non-adjacent enemy character. No carryover to another target is ever allowed in range striking. Only characters with the lightning bolt symbol between their battle factors have the ability to range strike. The number of dice thrown in a range strike is less than normal to an adjacent strike, but the target may not strike back, since it's not adjacent. Range strikes cannot be made by characters locked in contact with enemy characters. The number of dice thrown in a range strike is determined by the character's range strength, which is equal to 1/2 of the character's power factor rounded down. For example, we'll take this dragon here. With a power factor of 9, it would have a range strength of 4 and would throw 4 dice when resolving a range strike. Range strikes may be conducted up to a range of hexes equal to the character's skill factor, counting the range striker's hex, the target's hex, and each intervening hex. Range strikes traveling a distance of 3 hexes strike with the character's normal skills factor. Range strikes at 4 hexes reduce the attacker's skill factor by 1. For example, we'll say that this Minotaur with a skill factor of 4 range strikes at a range of 4 hexes. Because of the long range, the Minotaur's skill factor is assumed to be 3 instead of 4 when calculating the strike number for the range strike. Range strikes may not be conducted at a range greater than 4 hexes. A range strike must trace the most direct path possible from the range striker's hex to the target's hex. The player should imagine a line drawn from the center of the range striker's hex to the center of the target's hex. The hexes through which this imaginary line passes are the path of the range strike. When this path passes lengthwise along a hex side, it is considered to be passing through one of the 2 hexes the hex side separates. The range strike, the player decides which hex is part of that path. If any of the intervening hexes are blocked, the range strike is not allowed, with an exception. Range strikes are blocked by certain hazards. Again, refer to your hazards chart, and friendly enemy characters in the path. Friendly or enemy characters in the path of the range strike. So, if this Minotaur was to attack this ogre, imagining a straight line, you'd have to say that you're going this way when doing the straight line to avoid trying to strike through him. This one's fine, and then you land your target. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be a legal move. And again, the rulebook will have various examples for you to look at of what's considered blocked, what it would not be able to do, what's legal and illegal, etc. Range striking and normal striking can be employed by a player character in any order. All ranged strikes do not have to be conducted at the same time. They can be conducted first, interspersed with normal strikes, or saved until all normal strikes have been conducted. Lords, Titans, Angels, and Archangels are immune to ranged strike from any character except the Warlock. The ranged strike of a Warlock is never blocked or affected by the presence of hazards or characters. This is the exception mentioned earlier. Warlocks may range strike 4 hexes with no reduction in their skill factor. However, a Warlock's movement and conventional strikes are subject to the normal effects and presence of hazards and characters. Warlocks cannot range strike when in contact with an opposing character. This ogre's done for. Going over reinforcements. During battle, the defender may add reinforcements to his legion by mustering a character at the beginning of his 4th maneuver phase. To add a reinforcement, the defending legion must be qualified to muster a creature or Demi Lord from the land of the engagement. The reinforcement must move onto the battlefield during that player's 4th maneuver phase, or it cannot be taken during battle. If the defender wins before his 4th maneuver phase, he may still muster a character after the battle, if qualified. If the defender wins after the 4th maneuver phase and has not taken a reinforcement because either the legion contains 7 characters at the beginning of the 4th maneuver phase, or the reinforcement was unable to move onto the battlefield during that time, he may now do so. Reinforcements enter the battlefield from the defender's side of entry, just as the defender's original characters did during his 1st maneuver phase. Reinforcements which join a legion after a victorious battle are placed within the survivors on the master board under that legion marker. So if the battle was taking place in the plains, you would go to your muster chart, and you would be able to get a centaur at the very least. Provided the caretaker has centaur chits available. And remember, a legion may not muster a reinforcement if it is presently containing 7 characters. Do not count those already slain. No legion may receive more than 1 reinforcement per battle. Only the defender may receive a reinforcement, but it is not required to do so. If the defender wins the engagement by an agreement or by the attacker conceding after committing characters to the battle land, the defender is still entitled to a reinforcement so long as he is qualified to do so. If the attacker concedes before placing any of his characters on the battle land, the defender may not muster a reinforcement. Now we'll talk about summoning angels. Summoning is a type of teleportation where an angel or archangel is removed from a friendly legion somewhere on the master board and added to another legion which is either currently engaged in a battle or has just won a battle. The attacker must summon the angel into a battle during his 1st maneuver phase following the 1st strike phase, in which 1 or more of the defender's characters are slain. To summon an angel, the attacker must have an angel available in another one of his legions that is not currently involved with an opposing legion in an unresolved engagement. An angel that has already fought in another legion in a victorious battle this engagement phase may be summoned, and any damage previously taken is healed before it is summoned. An angel just acquired due to a previous battle in this engagement phase may be summoned. A legion cannot summon an angel if it is presently containing 7 characters. Do not count those already slain. Only 1 angel can be summoned by a player during this entire engagement phase. Only the attackers may summon angels, but he is not required to do so. A summon angel is removed from the original legion and teleports to the land of engagement, entering the battle land from the attacker's side of entry. The summoned angel will remain with the legion into which it was teleported unless summoned elsewhere during a later game turn, should it arrive in battle. If the attacker wins an engagement by agreement or by the defender conceding, he may immediately summon an angel so long as he has one available and has not summoned one already during his current engagement phase. If the defender flees, the attacker may not summon an angel. While battle is being resolved, the attacker only has the option of summoning an angel once, and that is during his 1st maneuver phase following the slaying of 1 or more opposing characters. If the attacker passes up his option to summon, or if he is unable to summon because the legion presently contains 7 characters, the option is lost during battle. If the attacker goes on to win, however, he may then summon an angel after the battle within the restrictions mentioned. Regarding scoring battles. Battle ends when at least one of the engaged legions is completely eliminated by combat or concession. but the engagement is not fully resolved until the winning player has added any character which he has allowed and which is not taken during the battle, and until the battle has been scored. Battles are scored by totaling the value of the characters in the losing legion and adding this total to the winner's score. The value of a character is the product of two battle factors, power factor times skill factor. So, for example, we'll say that Anthony just won this fight against Michael. And we take the lion, who has a power factor of 5 and a skill factor of 3. So their value would be 15, because 5 times 3 equals 15. The scorekeeper keeps a running total of each player's score. Players may not refuse points which they are due. So, a dragon puts Anthony up to 175. Characters lost by the winning legion are ignored for scoring purposes. Any engagement that results in a mutual elimination scores nothing for either player. There is an exception to that as well, which we'll go over later. Engagements won by concession or agreement score full points to the winner. An engagement won by the defender choosing to flee scores only half the fleeing legion's total value, round down by any fractions. The scorekeeper must keep a separate total score column for each player and must add the value of each engagement as it is won. A player's cumulative total score will influence the acquisition of angels and the power factor of that player's Titan, which, going back to the exception that I just mentioned, would be a player's Titan being slain in battle, which we will go over a little bit later on what that means for scoring. Regarding acquiring angels, each time a player's score attains any multiple of 100 points due to adding the value earned in victorious engagement, the player may add an angel to the legion that won the engagement. Such an angel must be added immediately and only to the winning legion, or it cannot be taken. So Michael just won a battle that puts him right at 100 points. He can add an angel to his legion. So at this point in the game, we would say that Anthony got an extra angel, Michael got an extra angel, and Chad and John need to catch up. And regarding other rules, an angel may not be added if it presently contains 7 characters in that legion already, or if there are no angels available in the caretaker's stacks. The color of the angels have no bearing on play, and an angel of any color may be taken when eligible. Added angels are placed directly into their legion's stack and are also immediately available to be summoned to other battles. We'll just say here that Chad just won a decisive victory that got him multiples of 100. If adding the value of an engagement to a player's score raises the score beyond more than multiple of 100, the player may add 1 angel for each extra multiple of 100 attained, provided they are available and that the winning legion can fit them in. Now there is also archangels. Those are lords acquired when a player's score attains a multiple of 500. An archangel is acquired instead of an angel, not in addition to it. If no archangel is available from the caretaker's stacks, the player may take an angel instead. The mechanics of acquiring an archangel are exactly the same as angels. Like angels, archangels may be summoned into battle and are returned to the caretaker's stack when slain, and may perform tower teleportation. The addition of an angel to a victorious and otherwise eligible legion is optional. For example, a player with a legion containing 6 characters may have the choice of taking an angel which he is due for having just won the battle and scoring high enough points, or for mustering an important creature from which he is eligible and qualified. The player has the option of taking the angel or taking the creature that they wanted to muster, or they can take neither. Now let's talk mustering. Mustering is the voluntary process by which a legion which ends its move in a new land adds new creatures and Demi Lords, and it is the main way by which players increase the quantity and quality of their forces. To muster, a legion must be both eligible and qualified to do so. The types of creatures and Demi Lords that can possibly be mustered in the various terrains are listed on the master charts placed in the corners of the master board. When a player wishes to muster a character into an eligible legion, he must reveal to the other players the character or characters that qualifies the legion to do so. The caretaker then gives the player the newly mustered character from his stacks, and the player places it under his legion marker. No legion may ever muster more than 1 character per game turn. A legion is only eligible to muster after moving into a movement phase and surviving any ensuing engagement, or when defending in battle, going back to reinforcements. That's the 4th maneuver phase for the defender. Legions which don't move, are not defending in battle, or presently contain 7 characters cannot muster. Creatures are listed on the master charts beneath the terrains where they are found. They are listed according to their values, with the lesser creatures being listed first. The number in parentheses are the creature's battle factors. The number to the left of the character's name indicates how many of that type of legion must have in contained units to be qualified to muster a creature of the next larger size. We're going to use this legion in this marsh as an example. So a legion qualified to muster a creature if it contains any creature listed on the master chart beneath the terrain by which it stands. A creature may muster a like creature or any lesser creature that is on that master chart. Several creatures of the same type may muster the next highest creature. Intermediate steps in the process and progression on the master chart cannot be skipped. For example, a legion containing an ogre could muster an ogre from a marsh. If it contained a troll, it could already take a troll, or it could also muster an ogre. A legion in the marsh could reveal 2 ogres to muster a single troll. A legion in the mountains could reveal 2 lions to muster a minotaur. However, lions are not sufficient to muster a dragon. The legion must contain at least 2 minotaurs, a dragon, or a colossus to be qualified to muster another dragon. A colossus in a legion in the mountains would qualify it to muster a colossus, dragon, minotaur, or lion. A legion does not have to muster and does not have to take the highest creature for which it qualifies. No legion can muster a creature not listed beneath the terrain on which that legion stands. Again, standing on the marsh here. A legion that can muster a character in more than one way can muster that character either way. The player only has to show any characters that it is sufficient to qualify, not all the characters. For example, this legion in the marsh, with 2 ogres and 1 troll, can muster a troll by showing either both ogres to the opponent or a single troll. It might be better to show both ogres, hiding your current higher strength troll. Tower lands are unique for mustering purposes. Any eligible legion on a tower land may muster any one of the 3 tower creatures, centaur, gargoyle, or ogre, regardless of what creatures it already contains. Or, eligible legions in a tower may be qualified to muster one of the 2 types of Demi Lords, warlocks and guardians. A legion is qualified to muster a warlock if it contains the player's Titan, which must be revealed as usual, or if it presently contains a warlock. A legion containing any 3 identical creatures, 3 trolls for example, is qualified to muster a guardian. A legion containing a guardian can muster another guardian. Now we'll talk about the title character, Titans. Each player has 1 Titan piece which represents the game player personally. When a Titan is slain, the owning player is out of the game. The continued presence of each player's Titan piece on the master board enables those players to move legions, muster creatures, fight battles, and remain in master play. As a player wins battles, the power of his Titan will increase, and it will eventually gain the capability of a Titan teleportation if it survives. Once lost, Titans cannot be replaced, nor additional ones gained. For each 100 points that a player scores, his Titan increases its power factor by 1. All Titans begin the game with a base power factor of 6. To calculate its current power factor, determine the number of times that 100 can be divided into a player's score, rounding down, and add this number to 6. For example, Chad has a score of 327. His Titan has a power factor of 9. 6 plus the 3. A player like Derek, who has a score of 1,163, would have a Titan power with a power factor of 17. When a Titan reaches a power factor of 10 by the owning player scoring 400 points, it gains the capability of Titan Teleportation. If a player's Titan is slain in battle, it waits till the end of the strike phase to be eliminated, just like other characters. When it's eliminated, so is the player and the battle immediately ends, following the end of the strike phase in which the Titan was slain. Add up the value of the Titan and all other characters in the Titan's Legion which had also been slain up to that point. Any character from the Titan's Legion which were still alive after the Titan was eliminated are momentarily set aside and do not count toward the score of that battle. If a player who slew the Titan still has characters remaining in the battle, the value of the Titan and its supporting characters also slain are added to his score. Any angels due to the victor because of addition of these points may be taken now. If the legion which slew the Titan was also eliminated, the slaying player does not get points from the battle. After scoring in battle, which the Titan was slain, remove all of the eliminated player's legions currently on the master board, including any remnants of the Titan legion still engaged, and any that would have been involved in other engagements this turn. These legions are now immediately eliminated, scoring half points to the player with whom they were engaged, or to the player who slew the Titan if the legion is not engaged. Points scored in this manner add to the respective Titan's power factor, but will not add to angels, and the winning legions may not recruit reinforcements regardless of multiples of 100 points attained. Players will have only one running score, and only under the special circumstances detailed above will multiples of 100 not add angels. The player who has eliminated the Titan passed the loser's legion markers, which may now be used in addition to his own. And just because it is in the rulebook, and sometimes it is forgotten when games are played, there is game etiquette. It's pretty easy. All play is expected to be honest and should be friendly. Even if it gets serious, the caretaker should be particularly careful to keep his legions separate from the stacks of characters he must pass out. And he should keep these stacks neat. Any player is allowed to count any of the caretaker's stacks, except during his own game turn, which would slow play. The caretaker should make sure that every character he hands out is properly due to the legion which it is given. Regarding the scorekeeper, they should maintain legible, accurate records which must be kept openly so that any time a player may see every player's score. The scorekeeper should announce the fact when a player's score has attained a multiple of 100 points. When a battle is resolved, the caretaker should announce which creatures have been slain. A die that rolls off the table, lands more than slightly cocked, or goes into a glass, ashtray, etc. should be re-rolled. If a player mistakenly rolls more dice than he was due, he must re-roll with the correct number. The second roll in this case may only count hits equal to or less than those achieved by the first roll. All additional hits are ignored. A player cannot concede the game except during his own game turn or while his Titan's legion is involved in an engagement. If he concedes his own game turn, all of his legions are immediately eliminated, his characters are set aside when slain, and no player receives any points for a concession. If he concedes while his Titan's legion is engaged, even during his own game turn, his Titan is considered as slain in battle and scored accordingly. A player who must quit the game should concede rather than commit suicide on another player's legion, although that remains his option. Alternatively, a quitting player may enter into an engagement with a weak player and then concede in order to help balance continuing the game. In the event that players must stop the game before it's decided, a victor can be determined by adding each player's score to the total value of his remaining legions. Each legion should be revealed as it is counted. The player with the highest score grand total is the winner. If instead the game is to be postponed, each player should reveal each of his legions to the scorekeeper, who should record its contents and the number of the land which it occupies. And there are also some shortened versions of Titan, which I'll just go over real quick. It can become a long affair when you're playing Titan, so depending on the number of players involved and their relative skill and experience, players constrained by time may wish to modify the game slightly to speed its conclusion. Examples of these modifications which can be employed to shorten the game are included in the following cases. First, the simplest way to shorten the game is to put a time limit on it. Before starting, a time limit is set at which play will cease. When the time limit is reached, the players total both their current score and the value of all of their legions on the master board, and the highest total wins. Second, players may choose to limit the time available to move and maneuver during Masterplay and battle. For example, each player could be limited to 3 minutes to complete the movement phase. Players who fail to move one of their legions within 3 minutes for Masterplay must randomly determine which one of their legions will move. In battle, a player is limited to 1 minute to move his characters during his maneuver phase. Allow 2 minutes for each player's first phase. Any character not brought to the battlefield within this limit are eliminated. The constraints handicap players with a large number of legions in play and those who are inexperienced and unskilled. They also train players to think ahead. And thirdly, a more drastic option to shorten the game is called Titan Plus. For this version, centaurs, gargoyles, and ogres are not used. Each player begins with 2 cyclops, 2 lions, and 2 trolls instead, and these 3 creature types are now considered tower creatures. In addition, players may use 8 Legion markers instead of 12 unless they eliminate another Titan, thereby gaining use of that player's 8 markers. Titan Plus eliminates much of the interesting strategy of the early game, but retains the climactic struggles with the more powerful creatures at the end of the game. Now you should have enough information to start playing Titan and finding the rule books if you need the hazard charts and skill charts and muster charts and all of that stuff. However, before I get into the expansions, I'm going to say that the Magi and the Mighty and the Demi Lords, while official, were never, well, one of them was published, one was not. One was handed out at a convention in the 80s, so it looks a little rough, and I haven't finished completing my custom version of that, but I did recreate the Magi and the Mighty, which was created by the creators of Titan and play-tested. It was just never published by Avalon Hill. So I created that. I'll be going over the rules for that. In this video, I will have the chapter markings and timestamps for those, but I will also upload separate videos for those in case anybody already has Titan and just wants to see the rules on those. So let's get in first to the Magi and the Mighty. I'll also be referencing the Badlands of Titan, which were some extra maps for battles. Alright, this is a look at the Magi and the Mighty, an official but yet unpublished expansion that was playtested by the original creators of Titan and their friends. A user on BoardGameGeek.com recreated this expansion through the playtest materials that someone had sent him, colored it, organized it, and typed up the rules and everything. So thank you, Daniel Karp, for that. You can find that in the Files section of the game Titan on BoardGameGeek.com. That's where I got it, and that's where I recreated this expansion, because I consider it official enough to add it to my games. Anyway, I'm going to go over a quick rules summary of the new stuff that this can put in the game, some of the rules changes, charts, etc. I'm not going to go over in detail what each spell does. You will have to look at that in the rules, because that's 18 pages of rules, and I'm not just going to sit here and record a token while I explain what a spell does. So let's just dive in, take a look, and hopefully you can find a way to create this expansion for yourself like I did, and add it to your game. The Magi and the Mighty is a supplement to Titan. It can't be played by itself. It adds magicians and spells and new powerful characters, including a new lord that can partially replace the Titan itself. The Law of Titan remains in effect, except where specifically altered or superseded by the new rules. When reference is made herein to the rules of the basic game, Law of Titan precedes that rule. This supplement represents an advanced system of play, so for players not thoroughly competent with the basic game, it's advised that they introduce themselves to this supplement by using only a portion of it at first. So, the Mighty can be played without the Magi. Players may want to just familiarize themselves with the non-mage characters that the supplement adds to Titan before tackling the complexity of spells. You can retain warlocks, demons, and Rakasha, although such may not cast spells. Don't use other Magi or any other spells. Warlocks may not be mustered just for winning a battle in the tower. And you can also use the Magi without the Mighty. Players may find it simpler to acquaint themselves with Magi and spells in conjunction with the master chart of the basic game. Use only the Magi and spell counters and spell cards of this supplement. All sections of these rules apply except rules which pertain only to those characters that are not in use. And this will be what they are referring to when they say spell cards. So some of the components of the game are going to be 63 1-inch square character counters that depict 17 new types of characters. The features of these characters are arranged in the same manner as those in the basic game, but note that the counters of the Magi are numbered in the upper right corner for identification purposes. It will be necessary to number your original warlocks in the same manner 1 through 6. The supplement also comes with 2 sheets of 104 3/4-inch square spell counters that depict various spells that can be cast. At the start of the game, intrinsic spells are sorted and set with the caretaker's stacks. All the other spell counters are placed in a container, which must be provided, for which they can be blindly drawn during the game. This container is hereafter referred to as the cup. The spells index will provide you a full list of the spell counters of the supplement, and that is in the printable rules that were made for this. There is also 6 spell cards that provide the player space to stack their Magi's respective spell counters. Each player receives 1 spell card at the start. Each spell card has a distinct space on it for every mage in the game. Each such space lists the particular mage's intrinsic spells and indicates the maximum number of spells that mage may possess, intrinsic spells included. When a mage acquires spells, its player must place them on the mage's space on its spell card so that it's clear to which mage such spells belong. Spell counters are stacked face down and need not be revealed until they are cast. The rules following will deal with the ways in which characters and spells and supplements are acquired and used within the context of the basic game of Titan. Included in the rules is an advanced character chart, the advanced master chart, and the expanded strike chart. These charts will incorporate all the elements of the Magi and the Mighty supplement to those of the basic game, and they will supersede the respective charts of the basic game. So, let's start with charts. One of the new charts is going to be the advanced character chart. This will list all the characters, their power factors, skill factors, range strength, if they can fly, if they can cast spells, their point value, and the total number available to the caretaker to hand out. You also have a new master chart. No terrain affinities of the original game have been lost due to this. However, some creatures are now on other terrain types to facilitate keeping balance in the game. This chart will supersede all the master charts that are on the master board and will tell you how to get the new creatures in the Mighty expansion and the Magi expansion. So, for example, in the jungle, 2 behemoths can get you a serpent now, but 3 serpents can get you an Etten. In this master chart, the mage native to that terrain is listed at the top. The number to the right of the mage is the number of spells such a mage may draw when its legion ends its move on such a terrain type. Magi are mustered in the manners described later in this video, unlike other creatures that are mustered from the master board. A mage may not muster another of its kind. The other characters of each terrain are listed below the mage, and these are mustered in the same manner described in the Law of Titan itself. When an arrow points from a type of creature, the encircled number of that type may muster a creature of the type to which the arrow points. The number listed beside the creature from which such an arrow points is the number of that type necessary to muster the type immediately below it. For example, we'll go to the brush. In the brush, 2 Gorgons would qualify a legion to muster a demon, or with 3 Gorgons, a legion might muster a behemoth. And then here we have the expanded strike chart. It's required to encompass all the effects that spells might have on skill factors. Note that it does not alter the strike number of any strike that can be determined by using the strike chart of the basic game. The strike differential is determined by subtracting the target factor from the strike factor after each has been adjusted for the pertinent effects of hazards, spells, or range. There is also a hazard spellcasting chart, which specifies restrictions on the placement of magical hazards, which we'll go over a little bit later. There is also a hazard affinity chart, which lists which creatures and conjured creatures are native to the conjured hazard. And then you also have the spell index, which tells you each spell in the game and how many are available and where you can learn what that spell does. And here is exactly why this video is not going to be overly long going into detail of each spell. But I will give you some ideas of what may occur in the game. The Magi and the Mighty supplement adds 17 new types of characters. The characters of Titan and this supplement are divided into several general classes. The advanced character chart lists which characters belong to each of these classes. This section outlines general rules concerning the new characters and will summarize the particular characteristics of their classes. First up are the Lords. A legion that contains a Lord cannot flee from an engagement or be captured. The Lords are now Angel, Archangel, Demigod, and Titan. Only a legion with a Lord may use tower teleportation. A Lord is immune to a normal, non-mage range strike, attack spells, bless spells, charm spells, and curse spells. A Lord is returned to the caretaker's stack when it is eliminated. Demigods are Lords. A demigod is acquired at the same number as an Archangel for multiples of 1,000 points. A player may opt to take an Archangel or Angel instead. Demigods cannot be summoned into battle. If a player loses his Titan, those of his legions that contain a demigod may remain in play, but his other legions are removed and scored as usual. Such a player would retain the use of his legion markers and continue to move, build, and engage his forces as usual, except that he could no longer Titan teleport or acquire other demigods. When such a player's last demigod is eliminated, The effects are the same as when a player without a demigod loses his Titan. A demigod's power factor is not affected by a player's score. Demi Lords, which are the Changeling, Demon, Guardian, and Rakasha. A legion that contains a Demi Lord may flee or be captured. A Demi Lord cannot be charmed by a charm spell. A Demi Lord is returned to the caretaker's stacks when eliminated. Changelings are Demi Lords. They are mustered from towers by legions with 2 or more guardians or another changeling. A changeling has a power factor of 10, in parentheses. 10 is the number of hits needed to slay a changeling, but the number of dice that it rolls may vary. Changelings also have a special ability in regards to mustering other creatures from the master board. The basic minimum number of the dice that a changeling rolls when striking is 5. This minimum may be adjusted downward by the effects of spells or hazards. This minimum may be adjusted upward if the changeling is adjacent to another character or evoked character, friend or foe, whose power factor is unadjusted and is greater than 5. A changeling may roll as many dice as the strongest power factor unadjusted that is it adjacent to and not separated from by a cliff. The changeling's adapted strength would then be adjusted for any spells or hazards that may affect the changeling. For example, a changeling adjacent to a hydra, that is atop a dune, would adopt a strength of 10. If it is struck at the hydra, it would lose a die for the dune. This ability to adapt does not affect the changeling's strike factor, nor does it allow the changeling to take the abilities of flying or range striking or spell casting. To adapt a character's power factor, the changeling must be adjacent to such a character at the time the changeling strikes. When a legion that contains a changeling musters, the changeling may be counted as any other type of character for that legion for the containing purposes of mustering. For example, a legion with a changeling and a griffin in the desert could muster a hydra. A changeling may be used to replace any one character. Changelings and one centaur in the woods would not suffice to muster a warbear, nor would one or more changelings by themselves suffice to muster anywhere but tower lands. Demons and Rakasha are demi-lords. They're mustered from their respective terrains in the same manner as creatures. Demons and Rakasha may range strike lords, but their range strikes are not immune to the effects of intervening characters or hazards, as are the range strikes of Magi. If using the Magi supplement along with the Mighty, demons and Rakashas have a limited ability to acquire spells. Spells cast by demons or Rakasha are cast in the same manner as with the same effects as spells cast by a Magi. A demon or Rakasha receives one battle spell from the cup at the end of the maneuver phase on which it enters the battle land. If it's a strategic spell, it is returned and another draw is made. If a player has several demons or Rakasha present, he may not draw that many spells and then assign them as he sees fit, but he must indicate for which character the spell is drawn at the time it is taken. The spell counter is placed face down atop the demon or Rakasha's counter until it is cast. Spell counters do not remain with the demons or Rakasha from battle to battle. Spells drawn for demons or Rakasha are always returned to the cup at the end of battle. The victory point value of a demon or a Rakasha increases by 4 points if a spell counter is drawn for it, even if the spell is not cast. A player may choose not to draw spell counters for some or all of the demons or Rakasha. A demon or Rakasha may not trade spells, nor may a mage give spells to a demon or Rakasha. Then you have Magi. The Magi are demi-lords. They are a special subclass of demi-lords. There are 7 types of Magi. The 6 types of the supplement, druids, enchanters, shamans, sorcerers, witches, and wizards, and the warlocks of the basic game. All 7 types of Magi have the ability to amass and cast spells. Each mage is represented on every spell card and is numbered for purposes of identification. Note that it will be necessary to number the warlocks of the basic game 1 through 6. And again, these are your spell cards. All Magi have the ability to range strike, and all Magi's range strikes ignore the effects of intervening hazards and characters. The skill factor and reduction due to range striking from a distance of 4 hexes, and the immunity of lords to range striking, in the same manner as warlocks in the basic game. Magi whose skill factor is 3 may not range strike 4 hexes. In battle, Magi of the same type may make a unified range strike when range striking at a common target that each mage could itself range strike at, making a single roll which would add 1 die per additional mage. For example, we'll say 3 warlocks are making a unified range strike would roll 8 dice. 2 for the range strength of each warlock, and 1 for each of the 2 additional warlocks. A unified range strike would count as a strike of each mage involved. A mage has an inherent ability, which is not represented on the spell counter, to dispel battle spells that it has cast itself. How a Magi is mustered will be gone over later. And the remaining figures are just creatures. Their characters introduced by the supplement are going to be Ettins, Gogs, Jotuns, Juggernauts, Mammoths, Phoenix, and Rocks. These new creatures allow the top-out creatures of the basic game to muster something better than themselves, thereby expanding the enlistment progression by a full step. Note that for mustering purposes, Colossi are not considered lesser creatures in regard to Mammoths or Rocks. The Mammoths or Rocks are not considered lesser creatures in regard to the Jotun or Juggernauts. Colossi cannot be used to muster Mammoths or Rocks, nor can Mammoths or Rocks be used to muster Jotuns or Juggernauts. And also, Colossi cannot be mustered by Mammoths or Rocks. So how exactly do you muster the Magi? Well, a legion must be eligible to muster a mage, or it must win an engagement which the enemy did not flee or concede prior to battle. Any mustering of a mage counts as the once per game turn limit that a legion may muster. A mage may be mustered as a reinforcement by properly qualified legions. Unlike the other Demi Lords or the creatures that are mustered from the master board, Magi cannot muster another Magi. For example, a legion with a witch in the swamp cannot use that witch to muster another. This rule also applies to warlocks, although warlocks may still be mustered by titans as in the basic game. Magi may be mustered from their respective native terrains by 4 of the least type of creature of that terrain, or by 3 of any other single type of creature or demi-lord of that terrain. For example, in the plains, a legion would need 4 centaurs, 3 lions, 3 rangers, or 3 griffins to muster an enchanter. In the Towerlands, centaurs, gargoyles, and ogres are all considered least creatures. A legion that wins an engagement with an enemy that they did not flee or concede prior to battle is qualified to muster a mage of the terrain of the engagement at the conclusion of the engagement, regardless of the components of the characters of the legion, so long as it does not already contain 7 characters and a mage of that type is available in the caretaker's stacks. The presence of a mage qualifies the legion to muster the least type of creature from its native terrain. For example, a legion with a wizard in the tundra would qualify to muster a troll. Whenever a mage is mustered, including when the mustered as a reinforcement, the player immediately receives its initial spells to the stack on his spell card. Now I'm going to talk about spells. I am going to skip over the direct detail of every spell that the Magi expansion adds to the game. I will instead just go over some basic concepts of the spells. What the spells do are all available in the rules that come with the Magi and Mighty expansion file. So there are 2 types of general categories of spells: strategic spells and battle spells. Strategic spells, like this one here, are denoted by an S at the top of the spell counter. All other spells are battle spells. Some battle spells are intrinsic to Magi. The spell cards note which spells come with that Magi, and they're intrinsic to that type of mage. For example, the enchanter has Dust Devil and Bolt. The spell cards note that, and you can find them by getting intrinsic spell counters, which are denoted by the topmost word being printed in reversed type. That's going to be white lettering within a black bar, like this eagle here. The intrinsic battle spells are sorted and set with the caretaker stacks at the start of the game. The other battle spell counters and all of the strategic spell counters are placed in the cup. Spells are acquired, transferred, and cast in the manners described in the rules. When a mage is returned to the caretaker stacks, so are its intrinsic spell counters, and its other spell counters are returned to the cup. Magi are the only characters that can amass spells. The single spells that demons and Rakasha are allowed to have are discussed earlier. The spell counters that belong to a mage must be stacked on its space on its player's spell card in the manner which the Magi may exchange or give away spells is discussed later. The initial spells that a mage receives included in its intrinsic spells, which are denoted on the spell card. And a draw of these many spell counters in the terrain from which it was mustered allows, which is noted on the advanced muster chart by the number to the right of the mage's power and skill factors. So, for example, we'll take a look at this enchanter. It would be able to draw one additional spell. Now, when you create the cup, the spells will be put in there and drawn blindly. So it's advised to use something that can't be see-through, so not a clear Ziploc bag or anything, just maybe a darker bag, pouch, bowl, or cup, so everybody can get spells at random. If, in a weird instance, the cup has no spells in it, then none can be drawn, and draws lost due to this are not made up later. If a player fails to take a mage's initial spells at the time he acquires the mage, he may do so immediately when he realizes his error, receiving both its intrinsic spells and a draw of the appropriate number. No other missed opportunity to draw spells may be made up later. Drawing spells from the cup is always a matter of choice in that the player may choose not to do so. A player may not choose not to take an intrinsic spell. Any mage may draw spells when its legion ends its move on a terrain to which it is native, and every mage native to such terrain may do so. These spells are drawn at the end of a legion's move during the movement phase, unless an enemy legion is present. If an enemy legion is present, such spell draws must await the conclusion of the engagement. In a tower land, to which warlocks are native, warlocks are able to draw 2 spells, and any other type of mage may draw 1. In the plains, brush, marsh, or tower lands, the drawing of spells due to terrain nativity is going to be during the movement phase or at the conclusion of an engagement which precludes the mustering of a character during the enlistment phase. Sorry about that weird pause there. That word is bungling me. Nativity? Native-ity. Oh well. Spells may not be drawn as a reinforcement during battle, except for the initial spells of a mage that is mustered as a reinforcement. Nor may a defending legion that wins an engagement draw spells for that terrain other than the initial spells of a mage mustered due to engagement, although it would receive spells for victory. When a legion wins an engagement that was not resolved by flight or concession prior to battle, and it contains one or more magi that survived the engagement, which would not include a mage mustered after the engagement, its player may immediately draw the allotted number of spells and distribute them as he sees fit to those surviving magi. The allotted number of spells is determined by the number of points scored for the engagement. Under 25, no spells. 25 to 99, 1 spell. 100 to 199, 2 spells. 200 to 299, 3 spells. 300 or more points, 4 spells. Spells drawn due to winning an engagement are not affected by the terrain of that land or by whether or not the legion reinforced during battle, and the drawing of spells in this manner does not affect a legion's ability to muster or draw spells due to that terrain. Now, the maximum number of spells that a mage may possess, including its intrinsic spells, cannot exceed the number printed on the lower right corner of the mage's space on the spell card. A mage may not draw spells in excess of its maximum, nor may it simply discard spells to make room for others. If a mage is found to have too many spell counters in its stack, the player to the left must blindly choose from the mage's non-intrinsic spells to remove the excess. If a mage is found to have an intrinsic spell to which it is not entitled, such spell is immediately returned to the caretaker's stacks with no compensation for its loss. Although, if a player draws an intrinsic spell counter from the cup, he may immediately return it to the caretaker's stacks and draw again. The methods by which magi may give or trade spells are strictly limited, as described. First, when a mage is mustered, any mage already in that legion may give the new mage one of its spells. This must be done immediately, and it cannot be done if the mage is mustered as a reinforcement during battle. This is only the manner in which a mage may give another mage a spell without compensation. Intrinsic spells cannot be given away. So this warlock decides to give this enchanter a spell, and it is going to be a djinn. Certain magi may trade spells on a one-for-one basis. Intrinsic spells cannot be traded. Players may not trade spells with other players. To trade spells, magi must be in the same legion or in the same coven. If a player has, anywhere among his legions, 3 or more of the same type of mage, they form a coven. When spells are traded, it must always be a 1-for-1 basis. So that trading spells does not slow play, the spell trading period extends from the end of the player's game turn until the start of his next game turn. When the preceding player announces the end of the game turn, players must cease trading. Although, if he has already transferred a spell from one mage to another, he must complete that particular transaction. A player cannot trade spells during the other player's game turns with magi that are involved in engagements. During a particular spell trading period, a player may trade spells only among the magi of one particular legion or one particular coven. Magi in the same legion need not be the same type to trade, and magi of the same coven need not be in the same legion to trade. When trades are made among the magi of the same legion, the magi must be revealed to show that they are members of the same legion. Spells cannot be traded among members of a coven while any member of the coven is in a legion that is engaged. Note that a player with these 3 unengaged sorcerers could form an active trading coven if he also has another sorcerer that is engaged. There are a total of 38 different strategic spells of 19 types. That's going to be 2 per type. There include 3 types of storm spells, a subcategory of strategic spells that are discussed later. So, a mage may not cast more than 1 strategic spell per game turn, and the casting mage must be shown when casting a spell that is strategic. The effect of a strategic spell is automatic and immediate, and except for storm spells, the effect of the strategic spell cannot be dispelled. Strategic spells are returned to the cup after they are played, except that storm spells are not returned to the cup until they have been dispelled. A legion cannot move or be moved by more than once per game turn, whether by use of a spell, the movement roll, or teleportation. Moving a legion with a spell would count as that legion's 1 move per game turn minimum, and teleporting a legion with a teleport to a tower or a terrain teleportation spell would count as the once per game turn maximum that a player may teleport. The only strategic spells that can be cast during battle are the Muster with a Mage and Resurrect spells, which may be used to reinforce in battle. And here's what those look like. Now, if you're looking for the effect of each individual spell, that'll be section 9.0 of the Magi and the Mighty, starting at 9.4.1, and there will be a list of what each spell does, what you can do with them, and when. Now we will talk about storm spells, a subcategory of strategic spells differing from the other strategic spells in that they are enduring, remaining in effect until they are dispelled. Storms affect the movement of legions, teleporting, and certain other strategic spells uses. A storm also has specific effects on the abilities of the characters in any battle taking place in the land in which the storm was cast upon. A storm spell is cast upon a particular land on the master board. The storm may be cast only on the land that the casting mage's legion occupies at the time of its casting. The storm spell counter is placed on the affected land, and it remains in place, in effect, until it is dispelled. Storm spells can only be dispelled by the use of a Dispel Spell. The elimination of the mage that cast it has no effect on the storm spell. When a storm spell is dispelled during battle, all effects of the storm are ended immediately upon the casting of the Dispel Spell. A mage may cast a storm spell during its player's commencement phase or at the end of its enlistment phase. The casting of a storm spell counts as the once per game turn limit that a particular mage may cast a strategic spell. No character or legion may be teleported to or from a land that is currently beset by a storm, nor can angels or archangels be summoned to or from such a land, nor may capturing or merging legions occur in storms. No more than 1 storm spell may affect the same land at the same time. A storm spell cannot be cast on a land that is currently beset by a storm. A battle that takes place in a land beset by any type of storm is allowed to go an extra round before it results in a time loss, ending instead on the defender's 9th maneuver phase. The battle would not be allowed the extra round if the battle was affected by a storm for less than 2 full rounds of battle. There's going to be 3 types of storms in the game, which are explained in deeper detail in the rules. That's going to be blizzards, fog, and thunderstorms. Each type has its own peculiar qualities in addition to the general restrictions of all the storms that you just were listed. Battle spells can only be cast during battle except when Dispel Spells are used to dispel storm spells. When an engagement is resolved by fleeing, concession, or negotiated agreement prior to battle, no battle spells may be cast for that engagement, nor may battle spells be cast after the battle is ended. Unlike strategic spells, most battle spells require a dice roll to determine their effectiveness, and battle spells are not returned to the cup or caretaker until the mage that possesses them itself is returned to the caretaker. There are 8 subcategories of battle spells: attack spells, bless spells, curse spells, charm spells, dispel spells, banish spells, evoked character spells, and hazard spells. Each subcategory and the various specific types of spells that compose each subcategory are discussed in their respective sections in the rulebook. The following rules of this section will discuss general limitations and allowances on the use of battle spells. The numerals in the upper right corners of a battle spell counter are for identification to track which mage has cast which spell. A mage may cast one battle spell during its player's maneuver phase, but it must not also move. A mage may cast one battle spell during the player's strike phase, the strike phase following its player's maneuver phase, but it may not strike as well, or range strike. At no other time during battle may a mage cast a battle spell. A mage may not cast a particular battle spell counter more than once per battle, even if the cast of the spell was ineffective. Nor may a mage cast more than one battle spell per phase, even if the cast was ineffective. A mage may not cast a battle spell before it has moved onto the battlefield, nor may it direct a battle spell at a character that has not yet moved onto the battlefield. Magi of a defending legion may cast battle spells in the strike phase following the first maneuver phase, even though no enemy characters have yet moved onto the battleland. But such spells cannot be directed at enemy characters, nor may they be used to create magical hazards or to evoke evoked characters in the first 2 rows of hexes along the side of the attacking legion's direction of entry. When a battle takes place in a tower land, the placement of the characters of the defending legion on the hexes of the tower count as the first maneuver phase. When a mage is in contact with an enemy character, it cannot cast a battle spell during the maneuver phase, and if such a mage casts a battle spell during the strike phase, the spell must be directed at itself or at an adjacent enemy character or at one of the hexes it or such enemy characters are in. A mage may not cast a battle spell during the strike phase following the enemy player's maneuver phase, even if it is in contact with enemy characters. When a strategic spell used for mustering a reinforcement is cast during battle, the casting mage may not be in contact with enemy characters when the spell is cast. Such use of these spells would count both as the once per game turn limit for strategic spells and the once per phase limit of battle spells. When a muster with a mage or a resurrect spell is cast to reinforce a battle, the defending player must cast it on his 4th maneuver phase at the time that the reinforcement is to be mustered. It does not matter where on the battlefield, the battle land the mage is when cast such spells, so long as it is not in contact with the enemy. A battle spell that is cast at a particular character, hex, or spell counter, it is revealed when cast and placed on its target, and whatever roll of dice is required to determine the effectiveness of the cast is made at that time. Dispel spells are the only battle spells that do not require a roll of the dice, except when a mage casts a bless spell upon itself. If the battle spell is cast at the casting mage itself, or the hex that it occupies, or any adjacent hex, or at a character or spell counter in an adjacent hex, it is proximal spellcast. 2 hexes that are separated by a cliff are not considered adjacent. If the battle spell is cast at a hex that is not adjacent to the mage or character or spell counter in such a hex, it is a range spell. The maximum range that a mage may cast a range spell is determined by its skill factor in the same manner as range strikes. Intervening blazes, dust devils, gateways, and volcanoes block the casting range spells, and any other intervening hazard or character has no effect. A mage cannot cast range spells while it is adjacent to an enemy character. Please note that range strikes of Magi are not spells. A mage may not make a range strike during its player's maneuver phase. There is no penalty or a mage casting a range spell at a distance of 4 hexes. The usual manner for determining whether the cast of a battle spell is effective makes use of the mage's battle factors in a manner similar to the method used for striking or range striking. This method does not apply to attack spells or charm spells. So when casting, the mage uses its full battle factors, adjusted for spells that affect the mage, but unadjusted by hazards when making proximal spell cast. When casting a ranged spell, the mage uses its range strength, 1/2 of its power factor rounded down, adjusted for spells with which the mage, but unadjusted by hazards. Let me go over that one more time. It uses its range strength, 1/2 of its power factor rounded down, adjusted for spells which affect the mage, but unadjusted by hazards. The target factor of the cast is the skill factor of the character that the spell is cast at or for the evoked character hazard spells, the number in the lower right corner of the spell counter. These target factors are not adjusted for the effects of hazards or spells. Then, the strike number of the cast is determined in the same manner as the strike number of a strike. The proper number of dice is rolled, and if any one of them equal to or exceed the strike number of the cast is effective. The effect of a battle spell will be immediate, enduring, or one of the battle round durations. Whenever a cast is ineffective, the battle spell is immediately placed face up on the casting mage's space on its player's spell card to show that it cannot be cast again during that battle. And the same thing is done when the battle spell has taken effect, if its effect is immediate or when the effect has ended. An enduring battle spell will remain in effect until it is dispelled. The mage that cast it or the character on which it was cast is eliminated or removed from the battlefield via gateway, or the battle ends. When a mage is removed from the battlefield, either by elimination or via a gateway, any battle spells that it casts that are in effect at the time are removed from the battle land and returned to its spell stack at the same time. A battle spell of 1 round duration is removed at the end of the casting mage's player's next maneuver phase, whether it was cast in a maneuver phase or a strike phase, for any of the reasons that an enduring battle spell is removed. When a battle spell is effectively cast on a character, that spell counter is placed atop the character and it will remain until its effect ends. If the character is moved, any spell counters atop that character are moved with it. This refers to battle spells that affect that particular character, not to battle spells that affect the hex the character happens to be in. Attack spells may only be cast at enemy characters that are not lords. There are 5 types of attack spells: Bolt, Evil Eye, Fireball, Mentak, and Poison. The purpose of casting an attack spell is to deliver damage to the enemy character at which the spell is cast. The dice roll made for an attack spell determines the amount of damage. The damage done to an enemy character by an attack spell is immediate and cannot be dispelled, although the enduring effect of a poison spell may be dispelled. If an attack spell is cast during a maneuver phase that delivers enough damage to the target character that it is killed, that character is not eliminated until the end of the ensuing strike phase, except that an evoked character killed in such a manner is eliminated at the end of the maneuver phase. Banish spells are cast in a manner described earlier. A banished spell may only be cast at an evoked character, friend, or foe that has itself already been cast. If the cast of a banished spell is effective, the evoked character is banished. If an enemy evoked character is banished during a maneuver phase, it is removed from the battle land at the end of that phase. If an enemy evoked character is banished during a strike phase, it is removed immediately. It does not strike back. A friendly evoked character that is banished is removed immediately during the maneuver phase or at the end of the strike phase, depending on which phase it is banished in. When banished, a non-intrinsic evoked character spell counterspell is returned to the cup. It is removed from the battle land. No points are scored for a banished evoked character, even if it was also killed by damage points before or after the banished spell was cast. A banished spell cannot be dispelled. Bless spells and curse spells are cast in the manner described earlier. Bless spells may only be cast on friendly characters, and curse spells may only be cast on enemy characters, but neither type may be cast on lords, except for heal spells. Such spells are enduring, noted by an E in the center of the bless or curse spell encounter, or of 1 battle round duration, noted by a T on the spell counter. While such spells are in effect, they alter the target character's battle factors or abilities in a manner shown on the spell counters and explained in the rules texts. A character may be simultaneously affected by any number of bless and or curse spells whose effects are cumulatively considered. A mage may cast a bless spell on itself without rolling for the cast. The spell is automatically effective. And here are some examples of the various abbreviations used on bless spells and curse spells. They are as follows: E is enduring, SKL is skill factor, SF strike factor, SPD is speed, T equals 1 battle round, and TF equals target factor. The plus and minus on such spells indicate whether the affected character is gaining or losing what the counter applies to. And again, how each blessing and curse works is in the section 14 of the Magi and the Mighty rulebook. We are going to touch on healing spells, however, before moving on. So, we are going to do a heal spell has an immediate effect of removing an amount of damage from the target character equal to the power factor, unadjusted by the spell, hazard, or range of the casting mage. So, for example, we'll say that this witch casts a heal spell at a lion 2 hexes distant that has suffered 3 points of damage. The range strength of the witch is 1, so 1 die is rolled to determine whether or not the spell is effective. The strike number of the cast is 3, and 4 is rolled, so the cast will be effective. 3 points of damage, the power factor of the witch, are removed from the lion. Any amount of healing in excess of the amount of damage that the target character had suffered is lost. It cannot be saved to remove future damage to that character or carried over to remove damage from some other character. The effect of a heal spell cannot be dispelled. A heal spell cannot be cast on a character that has already suffered enough damage to kill it. A charm spell may only be cast on an enemy creature. Lords, Demi Lords, and Evoked creatures cannot be charmed. Hazards have no effect on its cast except such hazards as block range spells. 2 dice are rolled for the cast if a charm spell is cast proximally. 1 die is rolled if it is cast as a range spell. The amount of the roll is added to the casting mage's power factor, unadjusted by hazard or spell. If that sum exceeds the sum of the target creature's battle factors, unadjusted by hazard or spell, the cast is effective, and the target creature is charmed. If the total equals the sum of the target's battle factors, unadjusted, the cast is ineffective, and the casting mage immediately suffers 1 point of damage, otherwise the spell is merely ineffective. Charm spells are enduring. While under the effect of a charm spell, the charmed creature is treated as a member of the casting mage's legion. A mage may not charm a creature if its legion already contains 7 characters. As soon as a creature is charmed, it becomes active as a friendly character, moving and striking with the casting player's own characters, except that it may not move in the same phase as it is charmed. If a charmed in a strike phase, it may strike or range strike if able. A charm spell cannot be cast on a creature that is already under the effect of a charm spell, nor may a mage have more than 1 charm spell in effect at the same time. Now, if the charm spell endures until the end of battle and the casting mage and the charmed creature both survive the battle, the charmed creature will remain as a member of the mage's legion, and it is no longer considered a charmed creature. If the player that the charmed creature concedes the battle before the charmed creature is eliminated, it reverts to its original player's legion. If the mage that cast the charm spell is eliminated at the same time as the last character controlled by an enemy player, the charmed creature immediately reverts to its original player's control. For victory point purposes, a charmed creature counts as part of the legion of the player who controlled it at the time it was killed. A creature under the effect of a charm spell cannot be exited from battle via gateway. If the casting mage is removed from battle via gateway before the charmed creature has been eliminated, it immediately reverts control to its original player. Dispel Spells. They can be used to dispel storm spells and battle spells that are enduring or of 1 battle round duration, except that evoked characters cannot be dispelled by Dispel Spells. Strategic spells that are not storm spells and battle spells whose counters are removed immediately after being cast cannot be dispelled. Dispelling a spell does not negate the effects that the spell has already had, it merely ends its effectiveness at the moment the dispel is cast. The effectiveness of a Dispel spell is automatic and immediate, no dice roll is required. The spell counter being dispelled must be within the range of the dispelling mage, and the cast of a Dispel spell can only be blocked by such intervening hazards as are listed in the hazard blockage list. A mage that is in battle can dispel a storm spell that affects the land from any hex on the battle land, and such a cast cannot be blocked, but a mage cannot dispel a storm spell while it is in contact with an enemy character. And those hazards that block are listed in 11.2.2 of the rulebook. A storm spell can only be dispelled by a Dispel spell cast by a mage in a legion on the land the storm besets, including during battle, as mentioned above. If the storm spell is dispelled while the mage is not in battle, the use of the Dispel spell would count as the once per game turn limit that a mage may cast a strategic spell, and the Dispel spell could only be cast during the player's commencement phase. When a storm spell is dispelled, its effects immediately end, and its counter is returned to the cup. When a Dispel spell is used to dispel a battle spell, the dispelled battle spell is returned to the spell stack of the mage that cast it, face up, to show that it has already been used in battle. If a Dispel spell is used to dispel a storm spell during the commencement phase, the Dispel spell is returned to the casting mage, but it cannot be cast again during the battle on that game turn. A mage has an inherent ability to dispel battle spells that it has cast, including evoked character spells. This ability is not represented by a spell counter, nor limited in the number of times a mage may do so. But the use of this ability would count as the once per phase limit that a mage may cast a battle spell, and, for example, if the mage made use of this ability during the maneuver phase, it could not also move, nor could it do so if it were in contact. If this ability is at range, the spell to be dispelled must be within the mage's range, and its use is blocked in the same manner as a range spell by the intervening hazards, again listed in 11.2.2. It can only be used to dispel one spell at a time. When a mage is removed from a battle, either by elimination or via gateway, any battle spells that is cast remain in effect at the time it was removed and are also immediately removed and returned to the spell stack. When a character is removed from battle, either by elimination or via gateway, any battle spells that affect it are also immediately removed and returned to the magi that cast them. When a hazard spell is dispelled, any spells that were cast on that hazard spell are likewise removed and returned to the magi that cast them. An evoked character spell is cast to evoke the evoked character represented on the spell counter into battle. It is cast in the manners described in 11.3 of the rulebook. It can only be cast at a vacant hex that does not contain a hazard that would disallow the presence of the evoked character. The features of an evoked character counters are arranged similarly to those of a character counter. After an evoked character spell is effectively cast, the evoked character may immediately be utilized in the same manner as a character of the player's legion in regard to movement, striking, range striking, blocking range fire, contact, etc., but they do not count towards the limit of 7 characters per legion. Evoked characters cannot be dispelled by Dispel Spells, but they may be dispelled by the Magi that cast them. Evoked characters may be banished. Evoked character spells are dispelled and returned to their respective Magi's spell stacks if killed by damage and eliminated. If the mage has cast them and is removed from the battle land, or at the end of the battle in which they were cast, an evoked character that is dispelled is returned to the Magi's spell stack. A non-intrinsic evoked character that is banished is returned to the cup. An evoked character cannot be charmed by a charm spell, nor may it exit battle via gateway. Attack spells and bless spells and curse spells may affect evoked characters in the same manner they affect other characters. Evoked characters may have an affinity to hazards. Consult the hazard affinity chart in the rulebook for that. If a cast during a maneuver phase, an evoked character may be moved in that same phase unless it was evoked into a hex adjacent to an enemy character. If cast during a strike phase, an evoked character may strike and range strike in that phase if they are able to do so. Once an evoked character becomes active, activity is not limited by the casting mage's spell range, nor does its activity limit the activity of the casting mage, nor does its presence disallow that mage from casting another evoked character spell. There are 4 elementals in the game: air, earth, fire, and water, and they all have different stats and different benefits from hazards. And there are also other evoked characters like lizards, bats, imps, harpies, etc. Hazard spells are cast in the manner as described earlier. The target factor of the cast is the number in the lower right corner of the hazard spell counter being cast. If a hazard spell is cast in an occupied hex, the cast loses 1 strike factor. The hazard spell casting chart, which is in the rulebook 18.8, specifies on which type of hexes the various hazard spells may or may not be cast. The magical hazards that are created by such spells are enduring, except that the blaze spells cast on a plains hex and the gateway spells last only for 1 battle round. Dust devils are the only magical hazards that can be moved after they've been cast. If the cast of a hazard spell is effective, the affected hex is immediately treated as if it contains a magical hazard. If that hex was occupied at the time of the cast, the occupant is only affected to the extent that the hazard thus created affects it. The hazard spell should be set aside, occupying counter on it so that it can be clearly seen. If it is set atop the occupying counter, be sure that the hazard spell counter is not moved along with the occupying counter. If a hazard spell is cast effectively during a strike phase, the damage that it might do at the start of each strike phase is applied immediately. The hazard spells of Bog, Bramble, Drift, Hill, and Plains, Sand Dune, Tower, Tree, and Volcano all create magical hazards whose effect are the same as those of natural hazard types. A Hill, Sand Dune, Tower, and Volcano spells all have different effects. When a magical hazard is created atop another type of hazard, natural or magical, the effects of the underlying hazard are nullified unless such combination of hazards is noted in the hazard spellcasting chart as being cumulative. When a magical hazard is cast at a hex that contains a magical hazard whose effects are not cumulative, the previous magical hazard is dispelled, which would include the cast of Thorn or Wood Spirit spell upon another of its type. If the effects are cumulative, each type of hazard remains in full effect. For example, a Bog spell cast at a Sand hex would disallow the entry of characters not native to Bog and slow the entry of non-flying Bog natives who were not also native to Sand. When the cast of a hazard spell is dependent on the presence of a previously created magical hazard, the dependent magical hazard is also dispelled if the magical hazard that allowed it to be cast is dispelled. For example, a Thorn Spirit cast in a magical Bramble hex could not remain there if the magical Bramble is dispelled. When a magical hazard is created atop another magical hazard in which its effects are cumulative in a hex which contains a natural hazard with which the effects of the previously cast magical hazard's effect are cumulative, the effects of all three hazards are cumulative. For example, a Thorn Spirit spell is cast on a hex containing both magical Bramble and natural Sand. The effects of all three hazards are in full force. The effects of blazes, dust devils, and other things are also explained in the rules, but we'll touch on the gateway for a moment. A gateway spell allows the casting player to either exit one of his characters from battle, including the casting mage, or to bring another character from one of his legions into battle. Only one character can be transported by any particular gateway spell, and no one character can be transported by gateways more than once in an engagement phase. The transfers may only take place during the casting player's next maneuver phase following the casting of the spell, providing that gateway spell has not been dispelled in the meantime, as the gateway lasts only one battle round. A gateway may be cast only in an unoccupied natural plains hex. While the gateway spell is in effect, no non-flying character may enter that hex, and no flying character may end its move on that hex, except the character that uses the gateway. No range strike, including those of Magi or range spell, may trace through a gateway hex. The casting player must declare which of his legions the gateway is connected to at the time of casting, and he cannot change that connection to another of his legions. A gateway cannot be connected to a legion that is or has been engaged during that engagement phase, or to a legion in a land beset by storm. Nor can a gateway spell be cast in a land that is currently beset by a storm. To exit the character must be moved into the gateway hex. It is then immediately removed from the battlefield and transported into the connected legion. Said legion cannot already contain 7 characters. To bring a character into the battle through the gateway, the character is removed from its legion and placed in the gateway hex, and it may be moved in the same phase even if an enemy character is adjacent to the gateway hex. The gateway hex itself does not count against the entering character's movement. A character cannot be transported by gateway into a legion that currently contains 7 characters. And again, charmed creatures and evoked characters may not use gateways. If a mage is removed from battle via gateway, any battle spells that it had cast remain in effect, that it has that remain in effect are immediately dispelled, and the spell counters are returned to the mage. If the casting mage exits via gateway, the gateway spell is also immediately dispelled and removed at the time, rather than the end of the movement phase. Thorn spirits, webs, and wood spirits also have various effects. And here I'm going to suggest that you print out or find the rules for the hazard spellcasting chart. I'm not going to go over it in too much detail because there's just a lot of information and it's easier to have this at the table as a reference. But this is the hazard spellcasting chart. It clarifies on which hexes the various hazard spells can be cast. Occupied refers to either if a character or an evoked character. The specific hazards refer to natural hazards except where otherwise noted. Elevated hazards are those which lie along hex size. Magical hazards refer to any hazard spell counter in effect on the battlefield except otherwise noted. So there's various symbols and letters here. X not allowed, P permitted, M permitted, also for magical hazards, and A not atop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just for magical hazards denoted by an M, wood spirits, etc. Note that the elevated magical hazards always nullify the effect of any underlying natural hazard, but that other magical hazards do not nullify the effects of natural elevated hazards. So for example, this bog on an occupied hex is permitted, providing that there is not another condition that disallows it. And then this 1 in the upper right corner is only permitted if the occupant is native to the hazard being cast. So you just follow what you're trying to do on this chart and find out if it's legal. When it comes to scoring with the Magi and the Mighty, the non-mage characters in the Mighty supplement are scored in the same manner as the basic game. Power factor times skill factor equals point value. If a spell is drawn for a demon or Rakasha, its point value is increased by 4 whether or not that spell was cast. Changelings are worth 30 points. To determine the point value of a mage, add the number of spell counters in its spell stack, not counting evoked character spell counters which were banished or killed during battle, and add that amount to the mage's power factor, and then multiply by the mage's skill factor. An evoked character that is banished does not score victory points. An evoked character that is killed and is also not banished is scored in the same manner as a character. If a mage flees, divide its point value in half. A charmed creature counts as a member of the Legion of the controlling player at the time it is killed. A character that exits the battle via gateway cannot count toward the point value of that battle. If a mage exits a battle via gateway, an evoked character that it had cast that was killed prior to the mage's exit may count toward the point value of the battle. No points are scored for capturing enemy legions. When a player's Titan or Demigod, if it is their final, is eliminated, the points scored for this legion that are removed do not permit the acquisition of spells. If a player's Titan is eliminated in a battle which he also has a Demigod present, the battle continues, and the player who slew the Titan does not score points for that other player's legions that are removed until the end of battle, even though those legions are removed from play immediately. And because when playing a game, etiquette is so important, it is in the rules, so let's go over this real quick. First is learning the effects and uses of various spells will require time, practice, and patience while other players ponder the options the spells make available. The players whose game turn or maneuver phase it is should be allowed to access these rules whenever they so desire. Players should make use of their time between their turns to acquaint themselves with spells that they hold. Spell stacks, like Legion stacks, are secret. A player is not allowed to browse through the contents of other players' spell stacks except when using a vision spell. A player is free to reveal spells in his stacks to other players if they so desire. The casting of spells is always optional. No instance exists in which a player must cast a spell. Spells drawn from the cup must be drawn blindly. Players are not allowed to look into the cup, even if only to see how many spell counters are in there. If a player is unable to draw spells from the spell cup because none remain, such lost draws are not made up when spell counters again become available. If a player musters a mage for which the caretaker's stack lacks the proper intrinsic spell counters, he may demand that the other players inspect their spell stacks to try and find it. He may not inspect the spell counters in the cup to try and find it. If it cannot be found, use a blank spell counter to replace it. A player may not alter the move of a legion after he has drawn spells due to that movement, nor may he decide not to muster a mage after he has already drawn spells for it, unless, of course, the rules would not have allowed that movement or mustering. The spell stacks of a player's magi must be kept carefully separated so that there is no confusion as to which spell counter belongs to which mage. The spaces on the spell cards provide ample room for this, providing that the spell counters are kept in neat stacks. When a mage is in a battle, a player may wish to place its spell counters to the side so that he can spread them out and consider them more carefully, but again, care must be taken not to confuse them with the spell counters of other magi. When a player has more than one magi in battle, it may be necessary to keep a written record of which mage cast which spell to avoid confusion. Because the returning of spell counters to the cup affects what and how many spell counters are in the cup has available to be drawn, clarification is required to exactly when spell counters are put back in the cup. Storm spells are returned immediately whenever they're dispelled. Other strategic spells are returned immediately after their effect is completed. For example, a Capture Enemy Legion spell would not be returned until the capturing was resolved or disallowed. A non-intrinsic evoked character that is banished is returned to the cup as soon as it is removed from the battlefield. In all other instances, non-intrinsic spells are returned to the cup when their respective magi and their intrinsic spells are returned to the caretaker's stacks. Spell stacks should remain intact until the end of battle so that they might be scored correctly. And that is some basic setup to get you started on the Magi and the Mighty expansion. Again, just use the Mighty or just use the Magi. Mix them both. Just play it how you want. There are also optional rules in this new rulebook, and then some designer notes and suggestions for strategy. It also has all the spell index, all the extended strike charts, advanced character charts, and master charts that you'll need. So everything you need is in that file. Again, I found mine on BoardGameGeek.com under Files on the Titan board game page. Magi and the Mighty by Daniel Karp. Now, at the start of the video, I said there was also an official expansion called the Titan Demi Lords. Well, I looked at it a little closer, and it's not official. While it was handed out at a convention in the 80s, it was designed by other players. So it was given out at Warthog, the Washington area retinue of tactically highly organized gamers. So this was designed by Bud Hamer, and it's just another way to play Titan. I'm not going to go over each individual rule, but I will tell you I also found this in the files section on Board Game Geek for Titan. And like I said, I don't really have this one colored or printed or anything else, but it is ready to go. I don't know how well it would work with adding the Magi and the Mighty in because it changes where these characters can be mustered and how, but it offers different varying effects and different lords and stuff from your new Demi Lords. So it's just another optional way to play if you want to look that one up. They each have their own effect, the way to muster them, what they do, scoring, and what they add to the game. It's a little interesting, but now we're going to jump over to the Badlands of Titan, which was official for the game. Now, the Badlands, as it is called, it's new Battlelands for Titan. It was available in a magazine, I forget which one at the moment, but those Battlelands were preserved via another file on Board Game Geek's website. They add various different stages and ways you can fight to the game and different maps. One of them is the plains. When there's a battle there, you actually would roll a die. On a 1, you'd get the water hole. On a 2, you'd get the town. On a 3, you'd get fort. And on 4 to 6, you'd fight on the original plains. There's also a new hazard, which has the effects of entry is forbidden to all non-flying characters, and a flying character cannot end its movement on a lake hex. Has no effect on striking, and no effect on range striking. There are alternative Badlands that you can just add to the game, and they will change up how the maps look. And again, those are available on Board Game Geek. Just a variance in the way to play. Now, they weren't officially produced as an expansion, they were just available in this magazine, but Avalon Hill gave full permission to the company for you to photocopy them for personal use. Avalon Hill's General Magazine, that's where the Battlelands for Titan came from. So, that is a rundown on how to play Titan, how to play the Magi and the Mighty, and to point you in the direction of 2 other expansions for the game if you can't get enough of this game. It is a really fun game, and I've spent a lot of time playing it growing up. I hope to get the Magi and the Mighty on the table with my buddies soon, because it looks like a lot of fun. I haven't played it yet, but I know despite my messy setup and relative inaction while I read a rulebook, I do hope that hearing the rulebook and getting some visuals does help you learn how to play enough to the point where you can get going and reference the rules as you play, and you won't need them as much. So, this is one of my favorite games. Thanks for taking a look at how to play it.